Nirvana's Nevermind turns 30 years old this year. Feel old yet? It's not only considered one of the greatest albums of the 90s, if not the greatest, but Nevermind often tops lists for the greatest rock album of all time, truly the champion of grunge. But back in 1991, there was another album from a Seattle band that enjoyed heavy airplay, 10 by Pearl Jam. 10 has stood the test of time, and Pearl Jam continues to sell out shows all over the world. And despite the breadth of their output, many would agree that this debut was their towering achievement, myself included. Funny enough, there was something of a rivalry between these two bands, mostly provoked by Kurt Cobain himself.
I've always hated their band.
And since then, I've actually had several debates over which album is better. It may seem like Nirvana's Nevermind is the obvious choice considering its cultural impact, but objectively speaking, which is the better album? Well, the answer is neither. Despite the fact that they both came out at the same time and from the same city, Nevermind and 10 produce a very different vibe, and comparing them is really like comparing apples and oranges. But that answer's too boring, and since YouTubers love conflict, we're gonna get competitive and discuss which elements work better on each album. For this video, I'm judging this strictly off my own opinion, and I'm going off of the copies that I have on CD. I'm not going off of remixes or music videos, just judging this solely on the music that we all originally heard. And by the way, if my opinion differs from yours, I'm sure you will have lots of fun explaining how wrong I am in the comments below. So let the immortal battle of grunge albums begin. This is Nevermind versus 10. We'll start with something simple, the presentation, specifically the album artwork. This may seem like an odd thing to focus on, but back in the 90s, album artwork was very important to us. At a time when there was no internet, looking at the artwork, reading the liner notes was usually what you did while blasting the album and annoying your parents. I even remember anytime I'd go to a record store and seeing this cover with the baby swimming and a dollar bill in front of it. Hell, I remember seeing the disc itself in someone's CD book and thinking, wow, that's so cool. The album cover to Nevermind is just iconic. It's become such a big part of pop culture, and it's as recognizable as the Beatles' Abbey Road or Fleetwood Mac's Rumors. The cover of 10 doesn't seem so remarkable at first glance. It looks like the logo for some after-school anti-drug group. Though what was cool was when you pulled it out of the case, it opened up to be a full poster. There's the band right there on the cover, even if you can't really see them. And then on the back, it has all the album information and at least some of the lyrics. For anyone who wanted to know exactly what Eddie Vedder is singing in even flow, you're out of luck, they don't list all of them. Nevermind has a similar idea, where they only list specific lines from the songs. Personally, I always liked including segments of song lyrics. I even did the same thing with my album, though again, it's kinda strange considering so many people didn't understand what Kurt was singing. The one thing Nevermind has that 10 doesn't really have are pictures of the band. They got 3 of them. There's one of Kurt giving the finger, we're off to a good start. Sort of captures all the different moods of the album. I do have a much clearer memory of looking through Nevermind's artwork while listening to the album. Pictures, lyrics, and liner notes aside, it's just such an iconic album cover. Very few can compete with it. This round goes to Nevermind. Next, we're going to talk about musicianship. Which of these albums really shows off the band's musical chops? I started really dissecting these albums when I was a teenager, and by then, I was a bit of a music snob. If you couldn't play guitar like Stevie Ray Vaughan, I wasn't interested. Fortunately, Pearl Jam guitarist Mike McCready was a huge fan of Stevie Ray Vaughan. I've always loved the sound he got out of his guitar on 10. The solos on Once and Alive, they're face-melting. And the rest of the band is really solid too. Stone Gossard's guitar riffs are just classic. Jeff Ament and Dave Cruzan are a solid rhythm section. And Eddie Vedder is really in control of his singing. I know Eddie's voice can be an acquired taste for some people, but if everyone in the 90s was trying to copy him, he's gotta be doing something right. Nirvana wasn't really a show-offy kind of band. In fact, Kurt famously trashed Pearl Jam for their elaborate guitar solos. I used to trash his guitar solos as a kid. What, he's only copying the melody as a guitar solo? That's lame. Yeah, I was a bit of a dick back then. If you dive too heavily into this album, you'll hear him singing off-key a lot. But again, a polished performance wasn't really what Nirvana was going for. It was more about the energy and the emotion. You also have to give them credit for the fact that there's only 3 of them. Kurt is the lead singer, the lead guitar player, and the rhythm guitar player. Dave's the drummer and backup vocalist, and Krist is holding it all down with that thick bass tone. And if you want to talk rock drummers, there aren't many who can compete with Dave Grohl, that's for damn sure. But regardless, Pearl Jam still wins in terms of musicianship. They just have more room to stretch out their musical chops, and they have 5 musicians to get that kind of sound. If vocals are your focus, even if you prefer Kurt's raw voice, you can't compete with the dynamics in Eddie's range, from the dreamy falsetto wails and oceans to the heavy screams of deep. This one goes to 10. Next is production. What's interesting about these albums is that both bands were very critical of the production. Nirvana thought Nevermind was too overproduced, preferring a raw, stripped-down approach that they eventually used on In Utero, while Pearl Jam has been very critical of the heavy reverb sound on 10. Personally, I like the way both these albums sound. I have consistently used Nevermind as the gold standard for what a rock album should sound like. This is when they got it right, got it absolutely right. You hear every piece of Dave's drum kit. Chris's bass is the perfect tone, cutting through while holding the bottom, and Kurt's guitars just explode. 10 keeps its roots more in that appetite for destruction sound, hence the heavy reverb. What I like about 10 is it sounds live. A live band in the studio playing together like a real band. Even Eddie's vocals feel like they're part of the performance rather than being separate from it. This is a tough one for me because I feel both albums accomplish what they're trying to do. But then I listen to innovative moments on Nevermind like the opening to Drain You. Despite Kurt's protests, producer Butch Vig just knew how to work the dynamics of Kurt's guitars, even if he had to trick him into overdubbing them. I mean, listen to the way Teen Spirit explodes into one of the most famous intros of all time. Now that's how it's done. Even though there are some neat textures, effects, and overdubs included on 10, the little touches that Butch Vig added to Nevermind really transformed this raw grunge performance into something truly special. Nevermind wins the production category. Flow of album. What I mean by this is, how does the album stand up as a complete work? Nowadays, most albums, at least in the mainstream, have returned to their utilitarian purpose of just being a collection of songs. But there was a time when albums like Dark Side of the Moon were carefully constructed to be a unique listening experience from front to back. So which of these albums holds my interest for the full 45 minutes or so? Well, let's start with Nevermind. You got Teen Spirit, In Bloom, and Come As You Are right out of the gate, 3 of their best-known songs. Then you dive into more of a heavy B-side with Breed, which changes things up, and then the dynamics change with Lithium, another classic, and even more so with the dark acoustic number Polly. So that's the first half of the album. So far so good, so very good in fact. We then get another angst-ridden fast tune with Territorial Pissings. And be honest, who doesn't love hearing Krist sing Get Together at the beginning of it? Come on, people now! Smile, brother, everybody get together! Then you got another heavy grunge B-side with Drain You, and then another heavy one, Lounge Act, okay. Then another fast rocker, Stay Away, and then another with On a Plane, and finally the soft ballad Something in the Way. Some copies have Endless Nameless, mine doesn't have it. Bottom line, the second half of Nevermind, even though I think it's really good, does lose my interest just a tiny bit, and if I really had to be nitpicky, I'd say it gets a little monotonous. Sometimes when you have too many fast songs in a row, you kind of forget what you're listening to. Even On a Plane, which is one of my favorite Nirvana songs, loses a little bit of its impact as opposed to when I just listen to it on its own. Of course, I'm sure the band wasn't anticipating this being one of the greatest loved albums of all time, so you can't blame it for not being a perfect representation of dynamics, but it does sometimes inhibit my enjoyment of the album. Now let's take a look at 10. You got Once, Even Flow, and Alive to start off with, 3 of their best known tunes, an upbeat rocking B-side with Why Go, followed by another classic ballad, Black. So for the first half of these albums, Nevermind and 10 are pretty evenly matched. Then you get the sheer anger and power of Jeremy. How do they follow such a heavy tune? With Oceans. Something that sounds like it could have been on a Brian Wilson record. It's the perfect way to follow Jeremy. Then we're back to rockin' with Porch and a heavier ballad, Garden, into the pure chaos that is Deep, and finally one of their most beautiful ballads, Release. What's also cool is they end with this weird atmospheric track, which is the same one that starts the album. It's a very Floyd-like touch that really gives the album a nice bookend. To me, 10 is just a little more dynamic and evenly paced. There's never a moment where I listen to a song and go, oh, that sounded just like the last song. Again, it kind of depends on what mood you're going for. If I wanted to just sit back and enjoy one of these albums from top to bottom, I'd be happy with either one. But I'd probably be more invested in 10, which gets my vote for best flow of album. Well, so far, both albums are evenly matched, so now it comes down to the deciding factor. Which album has the best songs? This is a tough one. Both of these grunge albums obviously deal with dark subject matters, very rebellious, anti-authoritarian, and emotionally revealing. Kurt wrote lyrics in sort of a fragmented stream of consciousness style, while Eddie's lyrics were more story-driven. Melodically, Pearl Jam is a bit more adventurous, while Nirvana takes their cue more from the Beatles' pop melodies. Immediately, I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, well, come on, Teen Spirit is one of the most famous rock songs of all time. But in my opinion, Even Flow is just as iconic. 10 has Jeremy, a dark song based on real-life events, as Eddie got the lyrics from a news article about a kid who killed himself in a classroom. But Polly is also a dark tune that came from a news article Kurt read about a girl who seduced her kidnapper to escape. And like I said, both albums kick off with 3 of their best-known songs. There's also a couple of songs I think are a little overrated, like I never really cared that much for Black on 10, and even Lithium on Nevermind I think has just been played a few too many times. I mean, I think they're both good songs, they just don't really do it for me. It's kind of interesting that they're both the 5th track on their respective albums. It really does seem pointless to try to compare each song, but I had to analyze which songs hit me the hardest on an emotional level. I don't think Nevermind quite hits anything like Jeremy. That's a really powerful song, from concept to execution, and it really is Eddie Vedder's masterpiece vocally. But there is one moment Nevermind has that 10 doesn't, nor any other album that I can think of. It's Something in the Way. The song is so haunting. It's so sublime. It's a song that could only come from the tortured mind of Kurt Cobain. There are very few albums that end with something so powerful. Release is a beautiful song and really captures Eddie's emotional plea to his father to finish off the album. But Something in the Way is just the musical personification of emotion. Inevitably, the question is going to come up, what's the best song out of either of these albums? Is it Something in the Way? Is it Even Flow? Is it Teen Spirit? Is it Jeremy? I mean, they're all great songs. But if I had to pick one song as my favorite from either Nevermind or 10, I'd have to go with Come As You Are. As you are. It's just a perfect song. That riff is so hypnotic. The lyrics are so simple but engaging. I have memories of going to bed listening to the song on my CD player, and it still gives me chills to this day. So even though it's a very close call, I have to say Nevermind has the best songs and is the better album. Nevermind wins. I know, big shock, right? But honestly, both these albums are equally great and deserve to be listened to for another 30 years. What do you think? Which is the better album? Comment below, let me know. Also, do you want me to do more of these versus videos? Let me know if you have any other suggestions. As always, everybody stay safe, and I'll see you soon.